I hope you had dinner because we have revenge for dessert. Cheat on your wife with mine? I will burn your life to the ground. I second that. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were almost 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. So your kids ratted your wife out for cheating. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself, but since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day that she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. I started tracking the mileage of her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some stuff was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL oh my god, AOL, holy smokes. She had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly effing, screwing one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. One of her ex-boyfriends. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking crap about his wife. He's married. Making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Oh, your wife's just a nasty person. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch, then go back to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she would pick up the kids and return home. Great. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other and the fallout absolutely effed mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what she could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, we'll call him Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and the other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Don't cheat on your partner. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to a point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidences with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. Bob! All you had to do was not cheat on your wife. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now they're both adults. I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kid's mom and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. Oh my god, I love this. I love this video. This is fun. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper as the previous owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day that I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering. But through my window, I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the new neighborhood. But I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house. So my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now, this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house. The first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends about the previous owners. He was super angry about it and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way was he doing anything. And yup, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get up to 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on a different tap in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious. But if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks, so it was all chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused by just leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days thinking if I should confront him, go to the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden, only costs like $5 per month? What the fuck? Bruh, what?
My brain is not computing.
Even with the neighbor also stealing from it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was very simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and I turned off the supply. Now, the way the household tank works in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that a starving pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for was that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring.
Oh.
If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all the residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day that this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police. And if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. Oh my God, this is way bigger than I thought. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in my country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloading the wiring, and burnt out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off until the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue. Y'all, the look on his face, he kept a straight one, but I just knew that he was holding back. He just said, oh, okay, and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and my neighbor, who could potentially be a pain in my ass, by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds with 1 stone. Y'all, do you think this is too harsh? I don't know why I'm like, oh, that's too harsh, but it's also like, you were doing something wrong though. Like, you shouldn't have been doing that. But do you think you could have done it differently and just said, hey, gotcha, get out of here with your water, go get your own? Perfect time for, speaking of water, hydration station. Cheers. I will not shut your water off. Drink your water. Hope you're having a good day. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord, and it was glorious. Gazumped? The hell does that mean? Gazumping occurs. Oh, here we go. We got a definition. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. Okay, I honestly thought you just made that word up. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and sink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and was very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew that they could trust her, so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away. Oh, no! Before anything was put in writing. No! Enter the new owners. The lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house. And with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices soared recently and rents had gone up, all while they had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It was pure greed, and it was obvious that they always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered. We moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture, and borrowed ornaments and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. What? The place felt smaller. This is so funny. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors because it smells like all of the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Gross. Neighborhood. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped it in the front yard of the neighbor across the road, with permission, of course. Neighborhood part 2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically a rush hour. Neighborhood part 3. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football, without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbors set up a barbecue in their front yard and we ordered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles wearing the roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within a few minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple weeks or so. They have an after party morning and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The party goer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than what they'd planned, but not as much as the greed bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owner's face when they found out. For all the people who say they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, average rent for a house that size had probably gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. That could be a movie plot. Tell me that would not be the funniest scene to watch ever of them doing this to their house for the open day. That's comedy gold. Someone needs to write that movie and
Cast me in it, please.
401k with a side of revenge. When our first child was born, my ex forced me to quit my job. When our second child was 2, I found out about his affair. By then, he was extremely, verbally, emotionally, and sometimes, physically abusive. When he abused our firstborn, I put him out. As you fucking should. That was in 2012. I couldn't afford daycare to work and had no family support. He refused to give me any money to take care of the kids, saying, "The courts haven't ordered me to give you a dime." He lied to the bank and had my accounts frozen and even assaulted me when I filed for default in the divorce. The judge finally ordered him to pay child and spousal support for 6 months after I kicked him out. It was $2,562 a month. He refused to pay it until the garnishment kicked in, and by then he was $6,000 behind in support. I used that to get permission to move away. I remarried a year after the divorce. I checked the court docs and there was a little box that said spousal support stopped upon remarriage if that box was checked. It wasn't checked, so I figured I was good. Instead of filing for his retirement, I just took that year of spousal support, $12,000, and left it alone. Spousal support was only ordered for 2 years. In 2017, he filed for sole custody of the kids out of nowhere. That was when he found out I had remarried and he had paid spousal support to me during the first year of my marriage. I told him I took that money instead of filing for my share of his retirement. I said if he let me keep that $12,000, I wouldn't file to split his 401k. He demanded that I repay the spousal support. The judge ordered me to repay it, but increased child support and deducted the repayment from that. It ended up that I got an extra $20 a month and he repaid himself. He dropped his bid for custody in exchange for 2 extra weeks in the summer. I pursued the retirement account split. He refused to cooperate and dragged it out for 4 years. It was so bad they sanctioned him and he had to pay me $600 a month for a year in addition to child support. They also charged him with contempt. In January of 2021, he proposed to his girlfriend. In May of 2021, I finally got the disbursement from his 401k. I won't say how much it was, but it was about 4 times the amount of spousal support overpayment. I had no idea it would be that much. I had thought it would be around $12,000, which is why I kept keeping that year of spousal and not filing for his retirement account was a fair trade. Had he not tried to take the kids from me, I never would have filed to split the account. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. His fiancée emailed me recently and told me it was my fault that he won't marry her because I cleaned out his retirement account. She said I shouldn't have stolen his money. I told her that I gave him the option to let me keep that year of the spousal support or take it back and I would file for the retirement. He chose to make me file for his retirement. I told her that if he really wanted to marry her and protect his assets, they could get a prenup so he wouldn't have to worry about it. She said she shouldn't have to sign a prenup because I robbed him. Yeah. I never asked to be financially dependent on him. He clearly indicated he wanted a court order to take care of his kids, so I got him one. I tried to be fair and take the lesser amount by taking the spousal support and not filing for his retirement. He wouldn't let me. That is some sweet, sweet revenge. Let me know if you guys want to see more of these stories. I'll see you in the comment section. Stay classy out there. Stay fancy. See ya.